having emotions is as much a part of being human as having a nose or an elbow or a brain that you can't see. We have emotions that we can't see. They're just so human. And yet, unfortunately, for so long, they have been kind of demonized, and we think of them as silly, awkward, fluffy, a sign of weakness, something to be shoved down or put away or dealt with behind closed doors in another room.
Welcome to the Soaring Child Podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm your host, Dana Kay. Hello, parents. This is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child Podcast. Now, there's a buzzword that goes around, and I am sure most of you have heard of it, and it is emotional intelligence. But what is emotional intelligence? Look, children with ADHD and adults, obviously with ADHD, they tend to have sort of that lower ability in recognizing emotions from sounds, from, interactions with other people. They may have more aggressive behavior, lower frustration tolerance, and impaired self-control. So when we think about emotional intelligence, we think, wow, this is something that we probably need to start teaching our children. But what is it? Look, it's related to so many important outcomes for our children and our adults. And children with higher emotional intelligence, they're better able to pay attention, which is what we want, especially for our kids with ADHD. They're more engaged in schools. They have more positive relationships, and they are also more empathetic. So I am so excited today to welcome our guest to talk about that exact topic. So if you've ever wondered about emotional intelligence for our children, then you definitely want to stay tuned. Now, my guest is an emotional intelligence author, speaker, and coach. Perfect person to be talking on this podcast. She specializes in helping parents to create an emotionally intelligent family, family culture at home. She is a certified emotional intelligence specialist. She is a pediatric anxiety therapist, and she has practiced as a speech pathologist for 10 years. So she's got a lot of skills there. She supports parents in learning how to manage their emotions, their parents' emotions, the parents' frustrations, and their stress so that they are happier, calmer, and so they can connect more deeply with their children, which is what we all want. She also helps parents to raise emotionally intelligent kids who are also self-aware and positively manage their emotions and behaviors. She was actually appointed as the Emotional Intelligence Mentor for Australia's Nurture Parenting magazine in 2021. She's also been featured on international parenting summits, conferences, and publications. And her groundbreaking book, From Chaos to Connection, was published just recently, exciting, in March 2023. And she actually lives in my hometown, Sydney, Australia. So now it is time to welcome our guest, Stephanie Pinto, to the Soaring Child. Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm just grinning. I feel so cheesy. Thank you, Dana, for having me, and for reading out all of the stuff that I'm so passionate about and I love. And that's kind of me on paper.
It is you on paper. Now, I was just recently an expert guest on your parenting summit. And so I was really excited to have you come on here. You know, emotional intelligence is really a hot topic, and I can't wait for you to share with all of our listeners about this really, really important topic. So why don't we just start from the basics? What is emotional intelligence?
Yeah, such a good question to start with, because as you said, it's still a bit of a buzzword, and I think people are using it sort of not quite knowing exactly the meaning behind it and how broad the term is. So emotional intelligence actually has I'll tell you sort of the wordy definition that we were sort of taught when I was trained, but it actually has 26 individual competency or skill areas underneath it. And some of them are communication, empathy, emotional self-awareness, behavioral self-control, integrity, personal power and confidence, building bonds and connections and relationships, inspiring and leading others. So there's actually a whole host of sort of areas that come underneath emotional intelligence and make it up. A lot of people think empathy is emotional intelligence, or they're kind of interchangeable. It's only one area that comes underneath it. So it's actually really broad. And I first learned about emotional intelligence online, and I was looking at it, articles and videos and stuff. And I noticed it was heavily about us adults in the workplace and how it could benefit teams and organizations. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And started talking to my husband about it, and we were kind of fascinated. Luckily, he was as well. And he let me waffle on and show him everything I was learning. And so what I was sort of learning at the start was that emotional intelligence is our ability to be aware of our own emotions and those of others in the moment, and to use that information to guide our actions, to make good decisions, and to adjust our behavior as we need. So if we kind of, it's a long wordy definition, and I don't really use it too much now because I put my family parenting spin on it. Like, I obviously do it in that context, but you can see that first off, we have to have the awareness of our own emotions, because they impact our whole day, don't they? And they impact our kids' day and us as a family, and how productive we are at work, and how great or not our relationships are. Our emotions really impact a lot. But also it says that we need to have the awareness of other people's emotions. And so we can't be blind to that, because then we are rude or blunt or uncaring or unempathetic, and, the implications that go with that. So it's that two-way sort of process. And then it's being able to manage my own emotions and use some coping strategies, or to know when I'm feeling a certain way, why is that happening and what can I do about it? But also it's not that we manage other people's emotions, because we can't, but we can manage our relationship and how we show up in a relationship when we know how someone else is feeling and what's going on for them. And that kind of takes a bit of an awareness.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, I never knew that there were like 20 something things that fall under the category of emotional intelligence, but exactly what you said, in that we can't manage other people's emotions. Excuse me. Little bit croaky today, but we can't manage other people's emotions. But we as parents all know that our emotions will drive a situation with our child. Who has been in that situation where, the child's melting down and then we start to lose it? The situation escalates and it's World War III, when really we could have taken a step back, managed our own emotions, looked at their emotions, and could have, de-escalated that situation. So makes total sense. Now, I think I just answered my own next question, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. But why do we need to become an emotionally intelligent parent first before we can raise emotionally intelligent kids?
You know what? That is something that I find is really becoming, it's kind of raising awareness around of parents that I've been talking to, and that are, in communities online and things like that. We're starting to realize that it's kind of impossible for me to raise kids who are kind and patient and empathetic and strong and driven and balanced and things like that, if I myself am not kind and patient and tolerant. And, if I'm not modeling the stuff that I want my kids to be raised with, or some of those traits or skills I want to see in them, they're not going to see me doing that. They're going to see me maybe being impatient and rushing and saying, I don't care, it doesn't matter, just do it. Or if you're not going to listen, then I'm going to take your iPad off you. Keep doing that and you're not going to the party on the weekend. So it's kind of like, oh, do we want to be modeling when someone isn't doing what you want them to do? Then you make them suffer and you take something away, or you stonewall, ignore them, you do this or that? Or are we kind, are we understanding? Do we get that, oh, my emotions are coming up now, and oh, this is kind of hard for me and I'm getting really frustrated, but I can manage that. And so let's work this out. I'll come back to you in a few minutes because my volcano is building.
Yes, and I'm sure as parents we've all had that volcano build and build and build and probably explode many, many times. I kind of like to compare it to when we're changing the diet of a family in a way, because if you're asking your child not to eat all of the CRAP, but then here you are stuffing your face in front of them and eating all that CRAP and saying and getting them in trouble for going off and eating a cookie or an Oreo, but there you are eating it. So I suppose it's very, very similar in that way.
Yeah, totally the same thing. And you've just caught me out because I remember like yesterday saying, no, you can't have like 3 cookies. Meanwhile, it's Anzac Day here. So I'm having like 4 Anzac biscuits. But yeah, it's the same thing. Like we've got to first have that awareness of, ooh, there is something in me called emotions that are, I often say to parents, having emotions is as much a part of being human as having a nose or an elbow or a brain that you can't see. We have emotions that we can't see. They're just so human. And yet, unfortunately, for so long, they have been kind of demonized. And we think of them as silly, awkward, fluffy, a sign of weakness, something to be shoved down or put away or dealt with behind closed doors in another room. And so, I really invite the people listening to think about what lessons, I guess, did you grow up kind of learning about emotions and the behavior that goes with that? Because if we're upset, sometimes we shut down, or we're moody, or, if we're angry with someone, we might lash out verbally or physically, or we might ignore them. So I always encourage parents to look beyond the behavior of what you're seeing in your child in this moment, because there's an emotion underlying that is so natural and so normal, and your child just doesn't know in that moment or can't access any better, more pro-social or productive way to deal with it by saying, please give that back. I've asked 3 times. They're just like, give it to me.
Yeah.
So we've got to kind of have that awareness. Yeah.
No, definitely. And I think it is easier said than done when I brought guests onto the podcast and we're like, well, you just need to, manage your own emotions. And they're like, well, yeah, but if you're every single day, you've got that kid melting down, you've got that stress in your family life, it's really hard. And you know what? For listeners out there, it is not your fault. Okay. Parenting a child with ADHD in particular is super, super hard, but there are strategies that can reduce those symptoms. And, that's why I'm so glad that all the listeners are out there listening to this episode and all the other episodes, because there are things you can do to reduce their symptoms. But Stephanie, can you just maybe give the parents the best place to start for themselves? We'll move deeper into, how to teach your kids to become emotionally intelligent, but what's something parents can do just to really get that ball rolling?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a bunch of things. Let me kind of pick out a few things that I think are really practical and really easy. First one is, it's easy to say, but there's so much stuff out there online. If you look at, there are some communities online. I run a community called Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. It's on Facebook, and that's obviously all for us parents, learning how to do this stuff. But I'm always posting about, okay, how can we start to, number one, unlearn some of those lessons that we learned as a kid about our emotions? Because unfortunately, they're kind of, they're not helpful, but sometimes they're bloody damaging.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to dads who have said, one in particular dad, beautiful guy, who said, I saw my dad cry twice in my whole life. And the first time he turned around and covered and, hid himself and then was fine, so to speak. And the second time he raced out into the backyard and, just quickly went off, and, it was obviously whatever happened, it was too much. And he goes, so guess what I learned about emotions? Not to show them and to shove them down and to be tough, and boys don't cry, and boys are tough, and emotions are for wusses, and, we could go on. But like those lessons we might not have actually been taught or told those explicitly. Like, I don't remember my parents saying, you should be a good girl, you should be polite and kind and happy and calm, but don't be angry and don't be upset. That's rude or that's disrespectful. But I learned that if I was angry about something or upset, then I was probably being rude and disrespectful, and I should have been happy with what I got or the situation.
Yeah.
So that's something off the get-go. Like, just reflect a little bit into, yeah, with this emotion like anger or fear or sadness or disappointment or whatever it is, anxiety, what did I learn about that? What are the stories that kind of go with it? Oh, I think it's a sign of weakness. It's like, you're soft, and things like that. Man, if I could get parents to flip those and think of emotions as almost like a superpower, that when you understand your own emotions and you have almost like a more objective understanding and an ability to manage them and take or make some time to look at, okay, when I'm feeling this way, what do I need? Like, what does my body need? Or what does my sort of heart need? And what am I needing in this moment? And giving yourself that, oh my God, like I've been able to sort of move through things or move past things much quicker now that I have emotional intelligence. Whereas before I might have stayed in the pit for like a day doing nothing, wallowing because a project fell through at work, or I got a text from my friend, or my call from my mother-in-law, those things. You can actually move quickly through those situations because you see them for what they are and you honor and accept those emotions. You're actually honoring that you have them, you're valuing them because they're telling you a message. So I know this is like it's probably going a bit deep, but it's really looking at how can I shift my lens on these emotions and these things that happen moment to moment. Like, throughout the day, I remember doing an exercise when I did my training. We had to like kind of mark or track our emotions throughout the day. I stopped mid-morning because I had like 50 already. And I was like, excited when I woke up, but I was also a bit sleepy. And then I was nervous about a thing that was coming up at work. And then my kids spilled some cereal and I was frustrated. Like, the amount of emotions that can really fluctuate your day. And we don't check in at all because we're too busy. And sometimes we get to like, I don't know, whatever time we go to bed. I go to bed at like 9, 10 o'clock now. My head hits the pillow. And like, I used to think, oh my God, like, what did I even do today? I was so busy. Like, you don't check in. And I could have gone up and down. I could have had an awful rest of the day from lunchtime onwards and not been able to get that back online. And I could have wasted a day. But now, having that emotional intelligence, and that awareness, I'm much more kind of calm, confident. I have that conviction in my decisions. I have that clarity in like where I'm going, how I'm feeling, and what's going on with me. And I'm much more productive as well. And my kids and I get each other more because I get when they have big emotions and they explode or they melt down over some tiny thing. I get why that happens.
Yeah.
And even though I might not be able to truly empathize with, oh, it's the red cup, not the blue cup, and that's such a bad thing, I can still empathize with that disappointment or the frustration of I was expecting one thing and I got another. So I'm often telling parents, maybe this is the last thing then, is not to take emotions personally from your kids, especially our beautiful ADHD kids, because it's nothing to do with you. I hate to say.
I know.
Mention some of those things, some of those cognitive skills that are still way under construction at the start as we kind of jumped on. Poor frustration tolerance, still developing emotional regulation, impulse control, empathy, and the awareness of the impact of my actions on another, and just like perspective taking. This stuff is supposed to be developing in our kids until really the mid to late 20s is what we know now is when the brain is fully developed. So if you've got a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 16, 17-year-old, they're not doing that on purpose. I know it really feels like it, especially when they say you're the most mean parent, you're so unfair and I hate you. They actually don't. And they're actually just letting out that emotion and that frustration of, you've said no to this thing, I can't go to the party, or I have to keep doing my homework. I accept and kind of empathize with those emotions underneath, not taking it personally, because that just gets us in like this spiral.
It does. It does. It puts us into a tizzy. Wonder if a tizzy is a US word or if it's an Australian word. I don't know, but when I'm on obviously I live in the US, but a lot of the words that come out of my mouth, I have to stop and I think, does anyone know what I'm talking about? So if you're listening and you don't know what a tizzy is, you can totally drop me an email and ask, or you can Google it and see what it is. Anyway, what I'm going to say is that parents, I just want to recap that, because if you don't have a pen and paper, just press pause right now and go and get a pen and paper, because I think what I got out of that, and I think is the best tip, is to actually take a piece of paper with you all day long and write down every single emotion that you have. Wow. That would be enlightening. We will all probably just be shocked at the amount of ranges that we as adults who can control all of our emotions go through. And so as a little child, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, to be able to handle all of that change would be huge. And it just puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. And I know that the people listening can't see what I'm showing you at the moment, but I have a kids emotion wheel, which is a beautifully colored. You can get these online. Like I've got some on my website, but you can get, if you just Google even kids emotion wheel or the emotion wheel. This is my colored kids one. It's got a bunch of emotions, which really, I mean, when we think about it, we often use a handful. We use happy, sad, mad, or pissed off, or busy. That's not even an emotion. How are you feeling? How are you going? Oh, busy. No. So the adult's emotion wheel has over 100 emotions listed on it.
Wow.
And some of them are so much more nuanced or specific than we realize. But a lot of the time, for example, if we're angry, what's underneath that is we're not even actually angry. We're either really hurt or maybe we're disappointed about something. So it's really important to start being a little bit more conscious and intentional and aware about noticing how you're feeling, using some of those more specific words. And I say to people, as you said, get used to kind of tracking your emotions, or just checking in, like every time you maybe go to the toilet, or if you're in traffic, they're just reminders of doing something.
Can I just say one thing there? And again, it's got nothing about this podcast, at the topic of this podcast at all, but Americans don't say toilet.
Oh, what?
No, that's okay. I go to the bathroom, and so it's very, very interesting. Totally fine. I just think it's funny because which I never knew, and I've been saying it for years. Oh, I've just got to go to the toilet, and people looking at me as if I'm so rude. But it's so it is totally fine, because I say a lot of things on this podcast that come across that way. But anyway, I thought I'd point that one out. Anyway, let's move on.
You know what? Can I just insert there? Sometimes in Australia, instead of saying, oh, we're so busy, I don't know if people will get this, but we might say, I'm flat out like a lizard drinking.
You know what? I've never said that.
And I remember on the conference when we did the interview, you said, Bob's your uncle. And I was like, yep. And then you go, people get that.
No one will get Bob's your uncle, because that is an Australian one. So maybe I need to have an episode on Australianisms so everyone really understands all of the things that I bring up on this podcast. Anyway, look, I think a lot of the things that I talk about is the gut-brain connection and understanding the gut-brain connection. And a lot of people think that a lot of ADHD symptoms are derived in the brain, but most of the time they're derived in the gut and, toxicity and overload in the body. But, can you explain from your perspective? I think it's important that parents understand the brain, understand about, child brain development, understand about their nervous system, because a nervous system, I'm just going to take a step back. I always talk about reducing ADHD symptoms is kind of like baking a pie. And the listeners would have heard me talk about that before, but there are many ingredients that go into baking a really good pie. We want to bake a really good pie. It doesn't have to be the most amazing pie, just has to be a really good pie. And that good pie has just got to be appreciated by all, and that pie's got to thrive. Anyway, the pastry is the diet. That's the foundation of everything. You can't have a good pie without the pastry. But I think regulation of the nervous system is really, really important. I think that's definitely an ingredient in the pie. So can you sort of explain that to the listeners today about giving them a bit of a perspective around the child's brain development, the psychology and that nervous system?
Yeah, definitely. This is the stuff I love. I feel like I'm a super nerd in this kind of aspect. So we talked a little bit about, number one, the brain is under construction in our kids many, many, many years. So unless you have grown adult children, your child's brain is still developing, meaning they're still kind of missing parts of the map, which would otherwise allow them or enable them to kind of behave almost like us as adults. But I want to say, like, a bit of a caveat on that. I am still not perfect at managing my emotions, and I still have impulse control issues with Tim Tams or Nutella or Vegemite. But so some of those things we expect to see in our kids can really frustrate us. Like, they will grab something off their sibling, they will refuse to do their homework, they don't want to brush their teeth, or they are complaining about something. Those behaviors, I think we forget that because their brain is under construction, they're not able to deal with those things in a much more adult way, I guess. And a huge kind of penny drop moment for me was when I realized about the expectation gap as a parent, which is when we are expecting our child to act or behave or do or say a certain thing. We think they should be able to handle it. We've seen them many times before do their homework, finish it in the right time, and then come for dinner or whatever. And when they're not doing it today, we have this big expectation gap, and we get really frustrated because we think, no, I know you can do this. I've seen you do it yesterday or last week or 100 times before. And so what we obviously we lean into getting frustrated, and we become triggered, and then we can have an emotional hijacking, which is, where we sort of, our amygdala takes over and we blow our lid. We've got to kind of take some steps back and go, oh, I get that your brain is still developing and still isn't as sophisticated, doesn't have that wiring that mine does, that enables me to go, oh, if I just keep working and I push through a bit more, I will finish my homework, then I'll feel really good, then I'll be able to come to dinner on time and my dinner won't be cold, so that'll be a better outcome. Like, that's a lot of steps for us, kind of, in terms of logic. So knowing that and just having a bit of an understanding. And then with the nervous system, this is the stuff that I really love, and I've only just started learning the last couple of years. For people who are interested, I would get them to just do a bit of a search on the polyvagal theory. And Mona Delahooke, one of my huge fangirling moment when I was able to speak and interview her, I think last year. A couple of her books I've got, one's Brain Body Parenting, and it really just helps us to understand. I often see my kids and other people as little nervous systems. And what that means is my child's nervous system is constantly and unconsciously sort of detecting cues. It's a bit like a radar. It's detecting cues as to whether I'm safe and things are okay, or is there a threat? Is there a danger? Is there something that's kind of difficult that I need to react to? And so it happens, as I said, underneath the conscious awareness. It's happening all the time for our kids. If they are calm, regulated, in a good space, if they're able to learn and listen and pay attention and connect with us, then they're kind of in that green zone where we like them to be, and their nervous system is regulated. But a lot of stuff can kind of imbalance that or trigger that alarm system of their nervous system. And then they'll get pushed or pulled into fight or flight, where they're reactive, or they're irritated, or they're agitated, or they're they shut down, or they get really frustrated and they lash out verbally or physically. And that's their nervous system doing its job for them. So again, we can't really, I'm careful with my words, because I want to say we can't hold our child accountable or responsible for the skills that they don't yet have, or the abilities they don't yet have. They're still so young and under construction. So, if you think of, sometimes you might have said, hurry up, you're taking too long. I don't care if you need to finish that level, turn it off now. That's enough to push a child's nervous system into that stress response where they go into fight or flight. It might not be a full blown fight or flight reaction and lashing out, but it could be you'll get a look from them, or or why, like they're moving into that like agitated, mobilized kind of state, and you can see it all over their face. Like their nervous system gives you clues, like the facial expression, the body language, and the tone of voice changes everything. So without going into that, there's sort of a third area of shutdown, and that's a little bit different. But even just knowing those two, I think that's a game changer for me as a parent, because I go, oh, I can see what's happening, and let me stop what I'm doing or saying that's actually pushing you onto the red zone a little bit more, and I'll pull you. What can I do to pull you back onto the green? And that's kind of what we talk about with co-regulating, just not continuing to threaten or to say, hurry up, I don't care, you're too late, or doesn't matter, and going, oh, let me see what's going on. Oh, I get it. He took that from you, and they're your favorite ones. Oh, okay. Come on, let's work this out. No, it's all right. Yeah, I'd be annoyed too. And so knowing the nervous system, I think, is really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think also we have to remember as parents that our kids are, especially those with ADHD, are a lot in that fight or flight. And so, we've talked about this on the podcast before, that kids regulate their own nervous system through us up until the age of 12 or 13. We are the keys to their nervous systems. And I think that when the body's in a state of inflammation, which I talk about a lot, inflammation exacerbates symptoms. It pushes them into that fight or flight. And so when you've been in that fight or flight for so long, your nervous system is out of control. And so we need to do multiple things to bring that nervous system back into check. One of them is helping them regulate through us. One of them is reducing inflammation through changing our diet, through looking at what else is contributing to that inflammation. And so I think that, this is such an important topic that we're talking about today. And I want to bring it back a little bit to that the emotional intelligence. We've talked about, we need to teach our kids through actions. We need to show them what emotional intelligence is. But can you sort of dive deeper about how can we help our children become emotionally intelligent outside of us?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So as we talked about, modeling definitely is something that I think is so underrated. It seems like, oh, but what do we actually do? Like, I want a poster or a tool. Modeling is showing your kids how to deal with their emotions. So how to be mad, not to be mad, but how do I be mad? So modeling to our kids, having conversations with them, which might be foreign, it might be a little bit weird, but maybe over the dinner table or sometimes in the car is great, because you're kind of not looking at each other, that it's not so intense, and you're just having conversation about what happened today, or how they felt about that, or what it meant to them, how are they feeling, and things like that. So conversations with kids, some of those resources and posters and things, like I stick a couple on my fridge, and sometimes they become part of the furniture. But on one random day, my daughter will, or both of my kids, they'll go over and they'll tell me, I want to tell you how I feel. Usually they're upset with one another, but just having those things as part of the furniture, like I talk about creating an emotionally intelligent family culture, means you kind of got to just do this stuff. This is just what we do. It's just what we talk about. It's how we deal with arguments. Like I've taught both of my kids, well, I just do talk to them about negotiating and compromise. And so when there's a blow up, as you said, I bring my calm, regulated nervous system in, and that brings theirs down. I don't match them where they're at and say, right, that's enough. I can't deal with it. It's not even 8 a.m. and you're both arguing. Go to your rooms. I say, whoa, oh, something's going on. You guys seem really mad. Something's happened. Like, I'm bringing that level of, okay, let's work this out. I want to hear what's going on. I'm going to give you my time so that we can work it out, because often we're too busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, how can we got to negotiate. She wants to use your new markers, and you just got them for your birthday, and are you worried about her squashing them or wearing them out? Yes. Okay, well, how can we kind of negotiate, or do you want to give her some rules around using those texters so that it's, and they'll both go, oh, okay, like it makes sense to them, and they can only access that logic and that back and forth, that sort of communication, when their emotions are calmer and settled. When emotions are on high, logic, language, all goes out the door. Like, that part of their brain, the prefrontal cortex, really is kind of going offline because their emotions are taking over. So, and that's another thing. You could talk to your kids about that too, depending on their age. And you just obviously change the language, and my speech pathology background comes in, and I think, I just adjust the concepts and the language. But there's a great kind of a hand model that I think came out of Dr. Dan Siegel, and it's just about flipping your lid. And what happens when you flip your lid, as when you're frustrated or upset, is that your brain kind of flips and your emotions take over. And we've got to wait. We've got to calm ourselves down before we make decisions or talk to that person. And so lots of things we can do, but it's, as you said, we've got to use ourselves to help our kids regulate, to learn this stuff. Like, if we are teaching them emotions are okay, and let's talk about them, and tell me what's up, and I want to hear it. No, let's sit on the bed, or let's go for a milkshake. Then, whoa, you're sending a very different message to, don't be silly, stop being so loud, go to your room, like shutting it down anytime there's anything other than happiness and joy.
Yeah, we've talked about flipping your lid a lot on the podcast, and one of the things that we do in our family, and I teach it in my program more from a food aspect than it's from both an emotional aspect and a food aspect, but we really tie how our body feels when we eat certain things and how that affects our emotions, because it does. And we every day before dinner, we make it a family. I loved how you phrased it, in that family emotional culture that you're building. And so we do it every day before dinner, and we sit around and say, well, today I was like really happy, and I really like to feel happy. And how that feels inside my body is that I feel really relaxed, and I feel like I want to smile, and I feel like love and sunshine is coming out of my heart, and I feel like I want to be with you and give you a cuddle. I prefer to feel happy. Then on a day where I feel angry, I'm like, today I felt really angry. And I think that was because of this. But what that feels inside my body is that I feel really tight, and I feel like I want to clench my fists, and I feel like I want to punch a pillow. It's okay to feel angry. But, being aware of how that makes your body feel is taking that step forward, I think, to that emotional intelligence, and really understanding what that means to you, and then what you can do to step out of that. So I think that all of the stuff that you've shared has really just sunk in for me, and I'm sure for all the listeners, because I think it is so important. And I think especially for our ADHD kids, because they really do have such a hard time managing their emotions, and I really want listeners to know that they don't need to suffer. They don't need to be in this constant state of fight or flight. They don't need their children to be in that constant state of fight or flight, and bringing in all those ingredients to make that really good pie is super important. Look, I think Stephanie, this is a really good place to end today's episode. But I appreciate you so much. It's been great chatting with a fellow Australian. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, your experience with all our listeners. Please tell listeners where they can find and follow you online.
Thank you, Dana. I really appreciate it. So the best place, well, the main two places are just my website, which is stephaniepinto.com. And then over on Facebook, I'm on Facebook personally, you can friend me as well. But also my community is Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. So they're probably the best two places. There's YouTube and Instagram and stuff. But yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again for joining me today, listeners. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at ADHDthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.